Everyone who's ever done an IT ops job knows about monitoring and analytics tools. Every day is a high stakes game of whack a mole, where the moles are network issues and cyber threats just waiting to make those dashboards turn red. As more systems go digital, it's a relentless race to stay ahead of disruption, always one click away from chaos. But what happens when those trusty tools that we've relied on for years, doing the same thing in the same way, just aren't cutting it anymore? Today's episode of Great Things with Great Tech takes us deep into the world of network performance monitoring and network detection and response with Pavel Minarik, the Vice President of Technology at Progress. His team at Flowmon is at the forefront of network behavior analysis, providing IT admins with the advanced tools they need to detect anomalies, mitigate threats, and ensure their networks are secure and efficient. Flowmon is revolutionizing the way organizations handle network performance monitoring and security, using cutting-edge technology to give IT professionals the upper hand in the constant battle against cyber threats and infrastructure issues. It's a look into how Flowmon's innovative solutions are helping companies around the world stay secure in today's modern threat landscape. This is episode 86 of Great Things with Great Tech, the podcast highlighting companies doing great things with great technology. Don't forget to head to YouTube at GTwGT Podcast or on all good podcasting platforms. Subscribe and follow and make sure you never miss an episode. And now, episode 86 with Pavel Minarik. Hey Pavel, welcome to episode 87 of Great Things with Great Tech. It's great to have you on here. And before we get into this whole history of Flowmon, which is interesting, and today we've got Progress, we've got Flowmon. I'm super interested in finding out about the history. Give a little bit of background about yourself. Firstly, where you grew up. I think it's good to sort of talk about lineage. I think you're in Prague. I love Prague, Czech Republic. Great country, great city. But give a little background about yourself firstly before we get into the ins and outs of Flowmon and Progress.
Hi, Anthony. Sure. Thank you for inviting me. So my background is I feel like being in IT since forever. Thanks to my father, I got access to this interesting technology since I started to visit elementary school. My father was a university teacher, so he got very early access to this technology. So I've started to write code with my friends, and even before going to university, I was already building and selling software to some companies and
Oh, okay.
organizations who required something to be developed for their specific purpose. During the university study, I took a job of an IT manager in fairly large organization. So that's where I got my experience with enterprise IT. And just by the end of the study, I was offered a very interesting opportunity, very interesting project to work on, which ended up to be Flowmon Networks.
Wow. Okay. So you mentioned, like, I'm intrigued always in the background and, in entrepreneurship of making your own software even before you were through your university. Like, was that just for local businesses within where you were growing up, or was it friends and family? I mean, I sold computers at university. I was known as the computer guy who always supplied everyone's computer for all their projects until one day a hard drive crashed and someone's projects got completely wiped and then no one bought for me. But that's another story. But what were the nature of the programs that you were creating back in the day?
Yeah, my customers were, I would say, small and medium-sized businesses across Czech Republic. And I focused on custom software development, and I also focused on the computer networks. So I was able to build them a network equipped with routing, switching, firewalling. So these essential technologies to operate the network.
Yeah. So you hold a PhD in informatics from Masaryk. Is it that how you pronounce it? Masaryk University.
Masaryk
Uh,
University. Yeah.
There you go. Got it right. That's very good. And you also your background is network behavior analysis and cybersecurity. So give a little bit of detail about that. Is that still something that you hold on to? Is it something that you still practice? I mean, where did you sit and where did you come out from after university?
So this is tied to Flowmon networks. So we started the so-called Flowmon anomaly detection system as a research and development project where
Okay.
we basically invented a couple of detection techniques that were not looking for specific signatures inside of the packets, but were looking at specific behavior in the network, which is way more stable and is able to discover also unknown threats or zero-day attacks. And based on that university work, we licensed and transferred the results of research and development into Flowmon. And we built and released our Flowmon ADS, the anomaly detection system, in 2009. So the PhD thesis is basically tied to this work
Wow.
that dates back to, I think, starting 2006.
Okay. I'm intrigued how that works because if you're doing it as part of a university PhD and research, and I assume you got funding for that as well, and that there was that sort of thing. How does that transform into an entity or a company? I'm intrigued in that, or is there a few steps along the way to make it become something that you can take as an enterprise?
Well, today it's, I would say, well-established process that has its standards, how to define the transfer price, how the contract should look like. But going back to 2009, for example, we were pioneers of doing these technology transfers. So we were discussing with the university representatives how to do it right, how to do it fair.
Okay.
You need to sign a contract and you need to, of course, pay university the right price, either in a one-time license fee or
Hmm.
some percentage of the future business coming from this new product. It really depends on what type of product you're building, in which stage you are with that product. If you deliver something completely new to the market, you can have some percentage for the university. If it's an innovation of something which is well established on the market, you probably go for a one-time fee.
Yeah, and okay, yeah, I understand that. And how does that compare to say something that would be say open source or because obviously there's an element of the university sunk some cost into you and into the research. So I guess the university is looking for a bit of a payback on that. But is there an option to open source that sort of stuff as well? Is that track that you
Yes,
can
it,
take?
it, 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 it depends on the terms and conditions of these specific research projects. Basically, what the funding agencies defined as acceptable, but it's common practice that part of these results are actually made available to the community as open source. But at the same time, if you develop something really interesting, really specific that has a commercial potential, you don't want to just make it open source. You want to license it to potential buyers who will really productize this technology and go to market and, of course, give some money back to the university.
Interesting, interesting. And as a student who goes through those processes and gets the PhD, and then, at what point do you think, or did you think, okay, well, I've got a product here that maybe now I can take and, become some sort of enterprise or entrepreneur out of it?
Well, we knew that since the very beginning. Since we started the project, we knew that we want to develop something really innovative that we will then transfer to a company and go to market. So for us, it was clear from the very beginning.
That's awesome. Okay, so go back to those early days there in 2005, 6. You had a prototype of a 10 gig network flow monitoring probe. So just talk a little bit about why that was so groundbreaking and what did it do differently to the traditional like network monitoring. And I guess for all of us that have worked within any type of network, any type of platform, we know what network monitoring at the basic level is, and we know typically about WhatsUp Gold and that sort of basic metrics monitoring. But what were you doing with Flowmon that was different and groundbreaking?
Imagine that now it's a year 2004, and imagine that you want to monitor the network traffic. I specifically say the traffic, not the router switches, if they are, online, what is the CPU utilization, what is
Yeah,
the memory
the ups or
consumption.
downs. Yeah,
That's a different story. That's the traditional IT infrastructure monitoring. But imagine that you want to monitor the real packet flow through your network to understand what is going on. So back then you had two options. First was to deploy a full packet or continuous packet capture solution that was receiving the copy of the network traffic and was basically storing that traffic for subsequent analysis on a large disk array. This is fairly expensive, it's fairly heavy, and it can lead to like multiple racks in your data center. The other option was to enable NetFlow or in general any flow export from your routers or switches. But back then, you will get to sampling rates like 1 to 1000, which means one packet is monitored and another 1000 packets is basically missed. So
I had no
there
idea
was,
as well that I didn't know that that was the reality of that sort of monitoring. Like when I was in those roles, I was thinking if we were doing NetFlow or something that everything was getting looked at. But you're saying there was a sampling rate that was happening there, which is quite
yes,
interesting.
yes. But for traditional NetFlow use cases, for service providers like, bandwidth utilization, capacity planning, billing, DDoS detection, I mean volumetric DDoS, it's all good. The sampling is not an issue. You will
Mhm.
get the volumetric statistics pretty much correct. So for these use cases, it was fine. But when you wanted to leverage this technology in an enterprise IT environment for network troubleshooting, for performance monitoring, for deep dive into root cause analysis of some network issue, NetFlow didn't help you. You need to go for full packet, which is time consuming, expensive, complicated. So imagine that it's 2004 and you have a device that is able to produce non-sampled one-to-one network telemetry on a 10G link on wire speed, so without any packet loss. That was huge. And this was a result of a research and development project funded by the European Union. And as a result, the evaluation committee recommended to commercialize this technology due to its high potential. So first, the idea was to sell the license to some existing player in the market,
Mhm.
but then the final decision was to start a spin-off startup, like a new company that will license this technology and bring it to the market. We really revolutionized the way how you can monitor the network traffic. We provided an alternative to these traditional continuous packet capture solutions that are usable in the enterprise IT environment.
Which is huge, right? And that's the whole reason for being, Flowmon today. And was there anyone else doing this? I mean, I hear about 10 gig network in 2004, and that seems like not a lot of people were using 10 gig networks. So to have this technology at 10 gig at that time was seems to me like it was way ahead of its time.
Yes, it was. And it was also, I would say, a commercial issue when we started the company because there was no buyer for 10G wire speed. They
I was
needed
going to say,
1G.
who's doing it? Yeah, who's doing it? Yeah.
So, so we very quickly realized that we need to scale down. So we came with an alternative that was focused on monitoring 1G bandwidth that was way easier and cheaper to build because it was purely software solution. So then we had a product that scaled down to the real buyers, real users, because for them 10G was science fiction back then.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I was going to say no one would have thought about it, right? So you went super high end in terms of the proving ground, and then realized from a commercial perspective that was too high, and you had to bring it down. So those 10 gig um, sampling probes or whatever you were doing, that were they hardware and software together to do that? And then, like you said, you were able then to just effectively do it in software, which obviously worked out beautifully as well because that's the most fantastic distribution method that we have.
Yes. And it was important, or it is important to realize that this way we were future proof. So once 10G starts to become adopted in enterprises, we were by default ready.
That's right. So this whole area, this is network detection and response, or NDR. So talk a little bit about that versus what we had traditionally, say, with what NetFlow did or what WhatsUp Gold was. What's the biggest difference when we talk about network detection and response, which is what I believe Gartner and those guys sort of talk about it as today?
Actually, what is beautiful is that it's not only NDR, it's not only network detection response, but it's also NPMD, network performance monitoring and diagnostics. So imagine that you have a single source of truth about your network traffic, single data that you leverage for both network operations and security operations use cases. This is something we brought to the market like 2009 when we
Mhm.
introduced our NDR capabilities. So we were able to cover both areas from a single product, single user interface, all integrated and available for to facilitate cooperation between network engineers and security engineers. So that was another way how we, I would say, changed the market.
Okay, and who were your first customers? What was the type of customers that you were? You mentioned service providers, I'm guessing telcos and whatnot. But what was your bread and butter in the early days in terms of who was, buying the software?
Well, it's hard to identify a specific vertical because as the product is focused on the network traffic, the traffic is same in very different industries. It's
Hmm.
about measuring IP packets. And as I used to say, IP address in Czech Republic and in Japan is the same. You don't need different solutions for that. IP packets in a bank are exactly the same as IP packets in a government organization.
Hmm.
So we got our customers from all the different verticals, but it's important to realize some reasonable starting point. You need to have a network big enough that you are in a need of such a solution. So over time, we saw that I would say our sweet spot customer starts at like 500 employees plus minus.
Okay, so so kind of higher level sort of enterprise sort of customers, maybe small to medium enterprise and enterprise
Yes,
customers.
yes,
Mm.
absolutely. It's like mid-market and above. It's not for SMB.
Yep, I understand. And I think what's interesting, and we'll talk about, where the solution today can really help, because obviously, I think from what we know today, that there's a lot of nasties that lurk in the network and they can sit there doing nothing for a long time, and a solution like this can help. But back in those early days, 2008, 2009, 10, 11, 12, what was the main primary sort of, value prop for this technology going to a customer?
That's my favorite topic because that will really explain what NDR is and what it sets apart from traditional signature-based approach or traditional anomaly detection focused on volumetric indicators. So imagine that you have this one-to-one non-sampled detailed data that basically describe your network traffic in each and every moment. So you can reconstruct all the network sessions that happened in the network in each and every moment in time, which means that you are not limited to volumetric anomalies. You can go beyond traditional statistical analysis that will tell you, hey, you have a peak in your network. You can discover even a single sessions where a malware infected device is contacting the command control center back. You have this level of granularity. So our value proposition was the ability to detect threats, anomalies, attacks that are hidden in the network traffic and that are not covered by traditional signature-based approach. If you imagine traditional signatures, they look for specific patterns, specific regular expressions in the packet payload, which means it's by default slow and it works only for known attacks, known threats where the signature is available, and it works only if the traffic is not encrypted.
Right.
While our approach is resistant to encryption, it's highly scalable, and you don't need a signature for a specific threat. So if the attacker needs to propagate somehow on the network, and the attacker needs to propagate somehow on the network, you will see these scattered footprints in the network traffic. You will be able to find it, like lateral movement, like exploitation of different services, attacks trying to guess the password or misuse credentials get from some user. You see that in the network traffic. You detect it and you report it.
How does that, like you guys are known for your innovative approach to the network traffic analysis. Flowmon, from what I understand, combines signature and anomaly detection methodology. How does the real-time threat detection work in Flowmon? What are the specific threats that you can identify and mitigate? You talked about it a little bit, but maybe dig into it a little bit more. I'm interested in that.
So the main or the essential aspect is combining different detection techniques. You can find on the market various products that, no doubt, they are really great in the specific detection technique they are using. So imagine that you have a system that is able to learn what are the normal patterns in your network and then detect deviations from that. So what happens if the attacker is already there when you deploy it? It's part of the normal pattern. So how we differ is that we combine different detection techniques like adaptive baselining, heuristics, machine learning, signatures, as you mentioned, reputation databases, behavior patterns. So we have a full stack of different types of detection techniques that work together. So what is missed by one detection technique is maybe detected by two others. And that's what sets Flowmon apart from what you can see on the market in NDR space.
Yeah, awesome. And that makes complete sense. It's just doing a lot more together because of the technology that you've got. You're able to look in deeper, but the techniques that you use are able to detect threats, not just based on pattern that are traditional, but on all of your approaches to be able to monitor them. I get it very much. Going back to the history a little bit. So if you look back in time, so there was a couple of different acquisitions through Flowmon's journey. What did that do, and how did you kind of navigate that? Because I can see a couple of acquisitions in 2008. Where are we looking at? 2020, Kemp Technologies, and then obviously the one where we currently sit, which is by Progress. So, mate, and you've been there for the whole journey, right? So, how did you deal with that? How did the company deal with that? What was the reasons for that at a high level? And how has it made you guys more powerful and stronger today?
Sure. So we actually have both experiences selling the company and buying another companies.
Okay.
We've acquired, I think it was 2014 or 15, we acquired a company called Ferretabs, which was focused on the application performance monitoring from the network traffic perspective. So the technology was able to capture network sessions, reconstruct the TCP sessions, parse the application protocol, identify individual transactions, and tell you this is the network transport time and this is the application response time, this is the SQL statement that was executed, this is how
Oh,
long
okay.
it
Yeah.
took. So things like that,
Oh,
which was a great addition to our portfolio because it's another angle that you can use to analyze the network traffic. So that was when we acquired a company. Now
actually,
it's
just
part
before you
of
go,
our.
just before you go forward, I think that's quite interesting because I do remember that VMware had a similar technology which I remember I was deploying, where you could actually see the script, the SQL scripts, and the time they were taking, and how much CPU and how much pressure and how much network time they were taking. So I remember that through the VM tools and through the analytics, you could actually see those queries. So I'm guessing it's quite similar technology to what you just
Um,
described.
I don't think so, because whenever you're able to measure, for example, CPU time, you go with an agent. So
Mm.
there has to be an agent on the database server to do that. We did it completely agentless, purely from the network traffic. So it was completely passive. It didn't touch the server. So we don't need to care if it's Windows or Linux or what is the version. We don't care. We just care about the network protocol as such. So even if let's say, even if the supplier doesn't let you install anything on the server, I don't care. I don't install anything. I will get it from the network.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it just made me think about this moment in time that I remember being able to see SQL queries from the monitoring flow, and it sounded like similar technology, but obviously different. You know, VMware, they bought a ton of technologies back in the day. Anyway, go on after the acquisition, and then
Mhm.
you acquired, and then there was an acquisition of yourselves.
So let's fast forward to 2020. We were already building Flowmon networks for 13 years, and we were, European company with headquarters in Czech Republic, which is not the best starting point to do a business in the US, right?
Hmm.
So the decision has been made by the company management and shareholders that it's probably time to find a partner that will help us to establish like true US presence. So we collected a couple of offers and we selected Kemp Technologies as the best way going forward. In fact, the combination of a load balancer
I
and
was going to
NPM
say
is interesting.
Kemp did load balancers. I'm a load balancer dude. I love my load balancers being a service provider guy. And I remember the Kemp load balancers because I used to look at them versus the other ones that I was using. So I've just put in my head where the name Kemp came together. Very interesting.
Yes. And when we were negotiating the terms and conditions, I would say I felt in love with Loadmaster, with the load balancer, because it was so lightweight and so easy and so fast to deploy. Like from downloading the VM to starting load balancing, it took like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's outstanding. And when we brought the products and technologies together, we have immediately identified an opportunity for integration between Loadmaster and Flowmon. So we have added the Flowmon probe functionality, the ability to monitor the network traffic and export network telemetry. We added this to Loadmaster. So now
Cool.
each and every Loadmaster is actually a probe that can monitor traffic that is flowing through its network interfaces.
That's awesome.
And it measures things like round trip time, server response time, retransmissions, because that's what the probe does. So now you have visibility into your critical company applications that you are load balancing, and you have a telemetry that will tell you what is the server response time of a specific server, which client has an issue with round trip time. You have all these metrics that you can slice and dice per application, per server, and interpret in Flowmon. So it's huge, and there is no other vendor that is actually able to deliver you load balancer and NPMD technology at the same time.
Awesome. And then Progress comes along. Not that long after that.
That was very fast. So I would say we didn't even finish the integration of the companies together, and the Progress acquisition happened. So I would say that as Kemp acquired Flowmon, it became really interesting in terms of the market segment, in terms of products. So it was kind of expected that Kemp will be acquired, but it happened in 1 year from the moment when Flowmon was acquired by Kemp. And this way we became part of a large, well-known, and as well established IT company that is publicly traded on Nasdaq for like 30 years.
Yes.
So that was our journey, how we got to Progress.
Yeah, and Progress has links to what we talked about earlier, WhatsApp Gold, and that's kind of all. Is that part of the Progress portfolio as well? So it's like you're almost coming full circle in terms of what was and you guys as the modern,
Yes,
and it's
yes,
all
it
coming
is.
together. Yeah, and you guys have integration into WhatsApp
Yes, it is.
as well.
That's another very interesting story because a couple of years back, before Progress acquired Kemp and Flowmon, Progress acquired Ipswitch, which is
Okay, yeah.
the original WhatsUp Gold company.
Yes.
So then we were now having together in a single company IT infrastructure monitoring WhatsUp Gold, NPMD and MDR Flowmon, which calls for an integration, which is, of course, what we did very quickly after the acquisition. I think like half year after the acquisition, we were able to release a new version of WhatsUp Gold that included integration with Flowmon using
Excellent.
Flowmon REST API. So now you can have your single pane of glass that will give you on a single dashboard consolidated information from IT infrastructure monitoring, network performance monitoring, and network detection response.
Like the best of all worlds, basically.
Yes, yes.
Very good.
And whenever you need to deep dive, you just go straight from WhatsApp Gold into Flowmon user interface to get more details about
I
the
can
specific
see
network
that. That's
computation
awesome.
or specific events.
Yeah, well, very good. I'm sure there's some awesome demos of that online on YouTube and on your website. I might link to that in the show notes. So I want to spend the last sort of, I think 9 minutes talking about, the modern use case. We talked about how you started and what you were, really setting the company up for and the technology for. But today, I think it's even more required, right? And there's obviously, we've got a linkage between Progress, Flowmon, and Veeam. At the moment, we have a great integration that we've come between the two companies. But I think rather than talking about that, give me your sort of outlook on where the technology can be best used today with the threat landscape that exists within cyber, malware, ransomware, and just
Mhm.
people wanting to do bad stuff within networks. It happens every day, right? So, how does Flowmon help in that world?
I think this really didn't change since we started because we as IT professionals focus so much on preventing incidents
Hmm.
that we don't realize that once the prevention fails, and it's going to fail, we see it in the news every day, what we are going to do. So still, way too many companies rely just on prevention. And when prevention fails, they don't have the second line of defense, which is early detection. You see statistics telling stories like average time of an attacker being active in a specific environment before being detected 100 days, 200
Yes.
days. What if you can reduce it to 1 day? You won't be able to prevent it completely. That's
Hmm.
irrational thinking. But what kind of damage the attacker is able to do in 1 day compared to 200 days?
Yep. What's he
So
not
this
able
is,
to get? What's he not able to learn? Because that's the biggest thing about an attack. Once someone gets in, they're learning about what they can attack, and then when they actually execute it, they've got every little piece that they need for a maximum impact event. But if you can stop that learning, then you're going to stop the amount of impact. To your point.
yes, that's exactly what you need to do. You need to break the cyber kill chain as soon as possible. You need to find out that you're compromised. You need to be able to understand the scope of compromise so you can take some remediation steps.
So how does that work? So give a very simplified example of where Flowmon has actually helped in this sense.
Okay, I'll give you an example from a healthcare industry, which is fairly critical considering the data they are dealing with. So imagine this situation. One of our customers had a ransomware infection and they discovered it through Flowmon that notified the customer that there is a device in the network that is now encrypting X-ray images on the storage. So they were able to stop it in like 1 hour. So the amount of compromised images was low. They were able to recover it from the backup. and maybe 3 patients need to take the X-ray again, which is completely different story if the attack goes undetected. Plus, they were able to immediately identify which device in the network is actually the source of the infection. So they were able to take it down very, very quickly. So that's one very specific real example. And I
And
have
does that,
tons of those.
yeah, oh, that's awesome. Does the software, I mean, one thing I like about the software as well, it's got a very nice intuitive interface, modern. I like the way that it presents itself out and the way you can deep dive and whatnot. Uh, do you work together with an MDR or an SDR solution from the security companies together? Is this how this works? Do you work together better, or are you guys sort of positioning as like you just said in that health example? Did they just have Flowmon, and was Flowmon just what they used to be able to detect that?
Back then, from the security standpoint, for detection, they had only Flowmon deployed. But of course, you need to think of other attack vectors. It's not only the network. Endpoints are exposed to a lot of
Hmm.
threats. So you should combine endpoint detection response with network detection response. And that's another I think important understanding or lesson learned. There is no single silver bullet. There is no single technology that
Good point.
will sort out your issues. So I don't like promoting and marketing these technologies like, okay, deploy this EDR and you are covered.
Love that.
Okay, so
Yeah.
what is your coverage? How many endpoints in your network are secure? All servers,
Mm.
routers, switches, printers, webcams, X-rays, or specific industry devices, forget about it. You won't install EDR agent there. So you need a combination of network and endpoint to get covered.
Yeah. Very good. Hey, just in a couple of minutes, talk about how AI. Obviously, like we've taken 38 minutes to talk about AI, which I think is amazing. But is AI going to be fit into your? You've already said that you were using machine learning, but the
Mhm.
technology that exists today, how are you leveraging that to make your platform better, your system better?
I'll give you a very specific example. First of all, let me say that AI doesn't equal generative AI. And the
Absolutely.
reason why I don't talk about AI is because for me it's natural. We're using these techniques like since forever to
Mhm.
build our detection capabilities. So for me it's like normal thing. If we take a look at recent innovations we did, so people are now struggling with the volume of events, incidents, signals they need to dig through. So we have built an layer in our system that acts like an, I would say, junior cybersecurity analyst that will sift
Oh,
through all the events and that will tell you, look at this device, its threat score is very high, or look at this device, its threat score jumped up from 20 to 65. Look at these new events that were detected. You haven't seen this before. It's new. Or look at this device. It's scanning all over the place. So it's an event summary that will shape your focus and it will give you starting points for your investigations. And we measured impact. So we measured that we were able to reduce time needed for an analyst to go through all these events by more than 50%. So imagine spending half of the time on going through your events based on an AI that is able to prioritize, summarize, and give you starting points of your investigations.
and more, that's becoming the use case, right? It makes everything more efficient. The smarter that you get, like you're saying, you're taking a job that could have taken hours before. You're reducing it to half that time, and no doubt you're going to make that even better in the future. But obviously, what you're also doing is making everyone else's job more efficient by
Yeah.
leveraging that. And the key point is that that data is only going to get bigger and bigger. It's only going to get larger and larger. The more data is going to be flowing through the network as we get larger networks, bigger and bigger throughputs, all that kind of stuff. more systems online. So it's very important to have a network detection and performance diagnostics. It's important to have network detection and response, everything that Flowmon is. And I think it's a really great platform. And I think this has been a really great conversation to get the background of the company, how it started, and more importantly, how you've been there from the start. So, hey, thank you, Pavel, for being on episode 87 of Great Things with Great Tech.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you for inviting me.
Hey, just as a reminder, thanks for listening into Great Things with Great Tech. Please stay tuned for more episodes where we continue to highlight companies doing great things with great technologies shaping our world. Don't forget to follow us on social media at GTwGT Podcast and follow and visit GTwGT.com for more great content on all past episodes. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe to your favorite podcast platform and on YouTube. Please spread the word. And if you feel like it, drop a review. Tell your friends. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Great Things with Great Tech.